limits. Imagine having a traffic cop in the middle of a freeway, stopping people here and letting them go there. That would be very inefficient and not very good way to get down the freeway. Well, net neutrality basically is the idea that there should be no discrimination on the internet on how data is transferred over basically the broadband pipes, as it were. That your internet service provider cannot discriminate on that content and delivering it to you. This idea in principle is very sound. In fact, it's been largely adhered to voluntarily by the internet service provider industry, and for very good reason. If your internet service provider, be it a Comcast or an AT&T or a Verizon, decides to only let you have access to what it wants you to have access to, or limit access to some of the things that you might want access to, as a customer, you're not going to like that and you're going to leave. It would be, I guess akin to a restaurant that you go in there for a cheeseburger and it decides that, well, we don't want to give you fries. Well, you'll stop going to that restaurant because you want your fries. So net neutrality in principle is good. It's been adhered to voluntarily, just basically because that's good business practice. There exists a good bit of competition in the broadband market. Not enough for some people. The common complaint on the left in these groups like Free Press and Public Knowledge is that the market is broken because people do not have a choice. But frankly, for the vast majority of people in this country, if you live in an urban area, a suburb of a high-density urban area, or even the exurbs of a major city, you have as many as 4 or 5 choices for broadband connections. It's only people really in rural areas that don't have as many choices as you would like. But they will get them eventually. One of the things that's frustrating about arguing for free markets in the digital economy is that the American people have become conditioned to become impatient about the pace of change. Even though the pace of change in the digital economy on the internet is enormously fast, much faster than in any other industry in history. But people, if an email takes 3 seconds to load, they get mad. Forgetting that 3 years ago you had dial-up. You can go with for very high-speed broadband, with a cable company. You can go DSL with several different phone companies. You can companies like Verizon are laying Fios lines. In fact, Verizon is almost getting out of the ordinary phone business altogether, selling all of their assets on that and focusing just on fiber, which of course can be used for voice. And that's about as fast as we can get right now. That's moving quickly through many of the suburbs in this country. So if people are just patient, within 2 or 3 years, the level of competition is going to be higher. This is the great growth opportunities for broadband distribution and build out, regardless of what broadband stimulus programs that the government is involved in. Then of course there's the wireless sector. Wireless right now is not quite as fast, obviously, as a wired broadband connection that you may have, but it's getting faster all the time. There's WiMAX opportunities out there that are like Wi-Fi on steroids with 100, 200 times the power and reach. So I think in 5–10 years, a lot of us are going to be getting our broadband wirelessly, and it will be following us wherever we go. So the market is really developing quickly here. We already have pretty good choice, and the choices are only going to grow and get better over time. There's an opportunity cost involved here when you have government regulation, because often the government doesn't tip its hand on what it's going to regulate or how it's going to regulate. So there's created this sense of uncertainty on whether this business plan is going to meet government muster, whether it's going to be approved or not. That alone, you basically, under a net neutrality regime, businesses, both in the content producing side and in the content delivery side, would basically be involved in a game of mother may I with the government. They have a business plan, they have this great idea, that might violate net neutrality principles. But net neutrality principles are so vague by definition, so they don't know. So you have to wait for the FCC to rule on whether or not this is allowable. You can just imagine, how the wheels of innovation start to grind to a halt at that point, which would be such a shame because no innovation or no industry has been quite as innovative as the digital economy, as the internet, perhaps even in American history. And to bring all that down because you don't know whether your business plan is going to be approved or not. The idea of imposing net neutrality by government fiat in this way, through the Federal Communications Commission, involves the government becoming very intimately involved about watching all of the data that moves over the internet. It's logical that it is not possible for the government to regulate net neutrality principles, which involves making sure data that moves over networks is not discriminated against, without the government having the ability to watch all of that data. You can't have that regulation without the monitoring that comes along with it, and there's no halfway option. You can't just look at some of the data some of the time. You have to have the ability, and frankly I guess bureaucrats sitting around and monitoring what is going on over our networks in order to enforce this law that would be net neutrality. I don't think anybody really wants to have the government involved in that kind of monitoring. The idea that net neutrality is only going to be going after the boogeyman in the industry is wrong. Commerce is a two-way transaction. There is the big business, there is the seller, and there is the buyer, and that connection is real, and it needs to be so it would be monitored on all ends. So do you want the government, under the auspices of looking at big business and trying to punish bad actors out there, getting a look at your data? I mean, it's the stuff coming to you is yours. Things going out are yours. There's a personal involvement for everybody here, and I think we all have a personal stake in resisting the government regulation of the internet. I think every American would think, no, that could never happen here. I mean, that's the kind of things dictatorships do, authoritarian regimes do. That couldn't happen in America. And I think it's right to have that instinct. But it's also right to think it could happen here. Again, do we really want to get the government involved in the business of monitoring, the greatest communication conduit in the history of man, and regulating it? The temptation of government to overreach or to go beyond its agenda or its mandate for regulation is immense. It happens everywhere.